This happened in early October, about 3 years ago. I was 21 at the time and in my last year of community college. School was stressing me out, money was tight, and I was sharing a tiny apartment with 2 roommates who never stopped arguing. I needed space, not just a break, but actual distance from people. Camping had always been my reset button. Nothing fancy, just me, a borrowed tent, a cheap cooler, and a spot where my phone wouldn't work. I decided to do a solo overnight trip somewhere within a few hours' drive. Not deep backcountry, but far enough that I wouldn't hear traffic or see other campsites crammed together. I found the spot through a local hiking forum. It wasn't an official campground, just a pull-off near a lake inside a state forest in northern Michigan. A few people mentioned they'd camped there before, said it was quiet, peaceful, and rarely busy once summer ended. October seemed perfect. Cool air, fewer people, exactly what I wanted. I left early Friday morning and got there around noon. The drive was uneventful at first. Highways, then smaller roads, then finally a long stretch of gravel. The forest thickened the further I went. Trees pressed in close, branches arching over the road like a tunnel. It felt secluded, but not uncomfortable. The pull-off was easy to miss. Just a narrow dirt opening on the side of the road leading down toward the lake. No signs, no markers. I parked near a cluster of pines and walked down to scope things out. The lake was calm and dark, surrounded by trees on all sides. The water barely moved, like glass. I didn't see anyone else. No tents, no fires, no footprints near the shoreline. That should have been reassuring, but I remember feeling this odd hesitation, like I got there faster than I expected, like I had skipped a step. I shrugged it off and went back for my gear. Setting up took maybe 30 minutes. I pitched the tent about 30 feet back from the water, just inside the tree line. I wanted a wind break. Once everything was set, I cracked open a drink, sat on a fallen log, and just listened. The forest was quiet, but not dead. Leaves rustling, distant birds, a faint breeze pushing across the lake. Everything felt normal enough. As the afternoon passed, the light changed. Shadows stretched longer. The woods took on that darker, heavier feel they get right before sunset. I made a small fire, cooked a simple meal, and watched the flames burn down while the sky slowly turned orange, then purple, then black. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Across the lake, on the opposite shoreline, there was a small shape near the tree line. At first, I thought it was a stump or maybe a rock. It hadn't caught my eye earlier, but I hadn't exactly been staring at that side either. I stood up and squinted. It didn't move. The lake reflected just enough moonlight to outline it. Tall, narrow, too straight to be natural. It looked like a post. I felt stupid for even fixating on it. Forests are full of weird shapes that only look strange at night. I sat back down and focused on the fire. Still, every few minutes, my eyes drifted back to it. Around 9:30, I decided to call it a night. I put out the fire, zipped everything closed, and got into my sleeping bag. The temperature dropped fast, but I was comfortable enough. I remember falling asleep quickly. What woke me up wasn't a noise. It was the feeling of being alert without knowing why. My eyes snapped open, heart already racing. I lay still, listening. That's when I heard footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, somewhere near the water's edge. Not heavy, but intentional. Definitely not an animal. Animals don't walk with that kind of rhythm. I stayed still, held my breath, The steps stopped. Seconds passed. Then more movement, this time closer. I could hear leaves shifting, small branches snapping under weight. Whoever it was wasn't trying to be quiet. My mind immediately tried to rationalize it. Maybe another camper. Maybe someone fishing late. I didn't hear voices though. No talking. No coughing. Just walking. Then I heard it. A splash. Not loud. More like something stepping into shallow water. I slowly reached for my phone and turned the screen on without unlocking it, just enough to get a faint glow inside the tent. My hands were shaking more than I expected. Another sound came from outside. A soft scraping noise, like something being dragged lightly over dirt or rocks. I couldn't take it anymore. "Hello?" I called out, my voice coming out quieter than I intended. The movement stopped immediately. No reply. I waited, my ears straining so hard they started to hurt. The silence felt thick, like the forest was holding its breath with me. Then, from somewhere just beyond the tent, a voice spoke. I thought no one was out here. It was a man. Calm. Too calm. I swallowed and forced myself to respond, telling him I was camping for the night. He apologized, said he didn't mean to scare me, and claimed he was just passing through. I asked him where he was headed. There was a pause, just long enough to feel wrong. "I don't remember," he said. I didn't reply after that. Eventually, I heard his footsteps retreat toward the lake again. Another soft splash. Then nothing. I didn't sleep much after that. When morning came, I packed up faster than I ever had before. As I was loading the car, I glanced one last time across the lake. The shape I'd noticed the night before was gone, but in its place, right at the edge of the water on my side of the shore, was something new. A long wooden stake, freshly driven into the ground, and hanging from it was a strip of dark cloth. It took me a second to recognize it. It was a piece of my jacket. This happened when I was 25, about a year after the trip I just mentioned. I'd sworn off solo camping for a while after that. But eventually, time did what it always does and dulled the edge of how scared I'd really been. I convinced myself it was just a weird encounter with someone unstable, nothing more. This time, though, I wasn't alone. It was a late summer weekend, and 4 of us decided to go camping to celebrate a friend's engagement. There was me, my buddy Trevor, his fiancée Melissa, and her older brother Ryan. None of us were hardcore outdoorsy types, but we'd all camped before. The plan was simple: drive a couple hours north into Wisconsin, spend 2 nights near a river, drink a little, relax, and head back Sunday morning. The campground was small and mostly primitive. No hookups, no pavement, just numbered sites carved into the woods along a looping dirt road. We got there mid-afternoon on Friday and took the first open site near the river. There were other campers scattered around, but nothing felt crowded. Families a little ways down, a couple RVs closer to the entrance. We set up our tents in a rough semicircle facing the fire pit. Trevor and Melissa shared one tent. Ryan had his own, and I brought a small one-person tent I used whenever I didn't feel like sharing space. The first night was uneventful. We grilled food, played cards, and stayed up later than we probably should have. By the time we turned in, the fire had burned down to embers, and the campground was quiet except for crickets and the steady rush of the river behind us. I woke up sometime in the middle of the night, feeling like I had to pee. I remember checking my phone. It was just after 2 a.m. I stepped out of my tent and took a few steps toward the tree line, trying not to trip over anyone's guidelines. That's when I saw it. Someone was standing on the dirt road, just beyond the edge of our campsite. At first, I thought it was someone from another site taking a late walk, but the longer I looked, the more uncomfortable I felt. They weren't moving, just standing there, slightly turned toward our tents. I cleared my throat loudly, partly to announce myself. "Hey," I said. The person didn't react. I stepped a little closer, enough that moonlight hit them. It was a man, maybe mid-40s, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low. His face was mostly shadowed. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded slowly, but didn't say anything. That was enough for me to back off. I wasn't in the mood to deal with strange people half asleep in the dark. I went back, did what I needed to do near the tree, and returned to my tent. As I was zipping it closed, I heard footsteps again, softer this time, moving behind the tents. I froze, holding the zipper. I listened as whoever it was walked slowly, crunching leaves, passing behind Trevor and Melissa's tent, then Ryan's. I waited for the sound to fade, but it didn't. Instead, it stopped right behind mine. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Seconds passed. Then a hand pressed lightly against the side of my tent. Not pushing, not grabbing, just resting there. I held my breath so long my chest hurt. The hand stayed there for what felt like forever, then slowly slid away. The footsteps retreated back toward the road. I didn't sleep after that. When morning came, I told the others what I'd seen. Trevor figured it was probably just a drunk camper wandering around. Ryan looked less convinced but didn't say much. Melissa was clearly unsettled, but she tried to laugh it off. We decided to stick with the plan and enjoy the day. We floated the river, cooked lunch, even joked about it a little. By afternoon, things almost felt normal again. That didn't last. When we came back to camp, Ryan noticed something first. His backpack was sitting upright next to his tent. He was sure he'd left it inside. Nothing was stolen. No zippers were opened. But things weren't exactly how we'd left them. Trevor's shoes had been moved closer to the fire pit. Melissa's folding chair was turned around, facing the woods instead of the fire. Small things, easy to shrug off individually, harder as a pattern. That night, we decided to keep the fire going later than the night before. No one said it outright, but none of us wanted to be the first to go into our tent. Around midnight, a flashlight appeared between the trees across the dirt road. Someone was walking slowly, sweeping the beam across the ground. Ryan stood up and called out, asking if everything was all right. The light froze. Then it went out. We all sat there in silence, watching the darkness where it had been. After a few seconds, we heard footsteps retreating, not down the road, but into the woods. We put out the fire shortly after that. Sometime deep into the night, I woke up again. This time, I didn't hear anything. I just knew someone was nearby. I lay there, staring at the fabric inches from my face. Then I heard whispering, multiple voices, low, close. I couldn't make out the words, but I could tell they were just outside the circle of our tents, moving slowly, deliberately. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for morning. When daylight finally came, we found the footprints, bare feet, at least 3 sets. They circled our campsite in a wide loop, pressed deep into the dirt as if the people had been standing still for a long time. Right before we left, Melissa found something nailed to a tree near the river. It was a scrap of paper. Written in uneven block letters were the words, "W.E. didn't touch Y.O.U." We packed up immediately and didn't stop driving until we hit the highway. None of us have camped together since. This last one didn't happen to me, but it's the reason I don't camp anymore. Not alone, not with friends, not at safe campgrounds off popular trails, not anywhere that requires me to sleep knowing there's nothing but fabric between me and the dark. It happened to my Uncle Mark. Mark was one of those people who felt more comfortable in the woods than around other humans. He worked seasonal jobs most of his life: park maintenance, surveying, wildfire prep, anything that kept him outside. When I was a kid, he used to take me hiking and tell me how people underestimate how many things live out there that don't want to be found. In his early 40s, Mark went through a rough divorce. Nothing dramatic, just slow emotional erosion. He didn't drink, didn't spiral. He just disappeared for a while. Sold most of his stuff, put the rest in storage, and started taking long-term camping trips while doing freelance lent work. The last trip he ever took was supposed to be a simple 2-week stay in a national forest in eastern Oregon. He told my mom about it a few days before he left. Gave her a general area, nothing specific. Said he'd check in whenever he got service. That was normal for him. He drove out on a Monday. By Friday, no one had heard from him. At first, we weren't worried. Mark would go dark for days at a time. But when a full week passed with no word, my mom called the ranger station handling that section of the forest. They told her they hadn't seen his vehicle come through any official access points. That's when things shifted. It took another 4 days before they officially labeled him missing. Search teams were sent out, volunteers, rangers, even a helicopter for a day. Nothing turned up. No truck, no campsite, no equipment. It was like he'd never arrived. 2 weeks later, a volunteer came across Mark's truck parked deep down an unmaintained service road that wasn't supposed to be drivable. It was backed into a stand of trees and partially covered with branches, like someone had tried to hide it. The truck was unlocked. Inside, everything was normal. No signs of a struggle. His wallet was still there, phone gone. About a quarter-mile away downhill from the road, they found the campsite. One tent, carefully pitched. Fire pit built using stones from the creek. No food left out. No trash. Everything done by someone who knew what they were doing. At first glance, it looked like Mark had just stepped away. Then they noticed the trees. Around the campsite, at roughly equal distances, were 6 trees, each marked with deep, deliberate cuts in the bark. Tall vertical lines, grouped carefully. Tally marks. 7 per group. Each tree had different totals. One had 14 groups. Another had 19. Another had 26. The highest had 49. No one knew what to make of that. Searches combed the area for days, working outward in expanding circles. They found footprints that appeared and vanished at random. Some barefoot, some deeper than they should have been for dry ground. There were no animal tracks overlapping them. What disturbed the search leader most was what they didn't find. There was no indication Mark had ever tried to leave. No broken branches leading away. No discarded gear. No dragged signs. No panic. No blood. It was as if he had simply stopped moving. The official report eventually concluded he likely succumbed to exposure or fell into an unmarked ravine further out. His body was never recovered. Case closed. Except it wasn't. 6 months after Mark disappeared, my mom got a call from the Forest Service. A hiker had found something and turned it in. It was a notebook. Mark's notebook. The first half was exactly what you'd expect. Notes about weather, trail conditions, supply counts, sketches of plants. Normal, calm, organized. Then the entries changed. The handwriting got tighter, more crowded. Entries stopped including dates. Instead, each page was filled with tally marks. Groups of 7. Some pages had a single group. Others were full from top to bottom. The final page had only 3 marks. After that, the notebook was blank. Tucked into the back cover was a loose sheet of paper. On it, Mark had written, "I don't think they sleep. I don't think they leave. I think they wait. If I stop moving, they get closer." That line alone was enough to make my mom break down. But the worst part came later. A little over a year after Mark vanished, a couple camping illegally in the same forest called rangers late one night. They said there were people outside their tent whispering and walking in circles. They could hear them counting softly under their breath. By the time rangers arrived, the couple was gone. Their tent had been slashed open from the outside. No one was inside. Near the campsite, carved into a tree, were fresh tally marks. 7 groups, just like before. That area has since been closed to the public. Officially, it's because of unsafe terrain. Unofficially, rangers warn people not to camp there at night, because sometimes, deep in the woods, people don't get hunted. They get measured.